In this day and age, it's hard to imagine Middle-earth as anything other than the vision that Peter Jackson had for the Lord of the Rings films. And while that has become a standard, long before Jackson's films, for the most part, it was just in the mind-eye of the reader of the Lord of the Rings books as well as The Hobbit. Middle-earth was something that everyone had their own take on. And certainly there were things that had some visual mediums associated to it. I'm thinking especially of the Rankin and Bass Hobbit film as well as their take on The Return of the King and Ralph Bakshi's The Lord of the Rings film. And while these things had some visual flair to them, they were kind of mediocre fantasy in a way, and I don't think they really captured what most people envisioned. Now, there were a lot of other mediums where Lord of the Rings came into play, and the vision of what Middle-earth looked like came through in the mind-eye of many different artists. And you have that both in art, as well as kind of pop culture things such as tradable card games. In fact, I have a collection myself of a Middle-earth collectible card game. I've got as many of those cards as I can get. They're really hard to find. They have this wonderful art, and it's different, it's imaginative, and it's a different take on Middle-earth. Now, I'm doing this video because I was cleaning out my garage, I'm working on converting it to a good workshop, and while I was doing that, I came across a large box of action figures. And I honestly forgot that I had these, and I was very surprised to find them. I bought them all in one kind of big bulk eBay order. I've got a really good deal, and they are kind of a bit of history, but they are action figures from The Lord of the Rings. And this is pre-Jackson film, so these are based wholly on the books and wholly on the imagination of the people creating the action figures. So I figured I would share some of them. This first one is the Barrow White. Now, these did not actually show up in the Lord of the Rings films. In fact, they glossed over that entire part of the book. But I found it very interesting to see kind of an idea of what these could have looked like. And these action figures are very interesting because they've actually got a very good, high-quality detail. And the company that made it, Toy Vault, makes a lot of kind of different types of action figures for a lot of different things. In fact, on the back of this box, you can see one of them is Farscape. Didn't really know there were Farscape action figures. So yeah, the Barrow White. Interesting one. Now, their take on Frodo is very interesting. So I'm going to go through a couple of the Frodos that I have, and they're all these different variations. So here is Frodo when he is in the Shire. Now, if you've read the book before, you may not realize this if you've only seen the film, but in the book, Frodo is about 30 years old around the time that all the things of the party tree are happening, that Bilbo is planning on leaving. And he's about 50 years old when he leaves the Shire. So there's like this 20-year gap, it's a huge gap, between when Frodo's first introduced to us and when he leaves the Shire for the first time to go on his adventure. So again, the Peter Jackson mindset, we think of young Elijah Wood, but he was actually 50 years old at that time. And it's a very, very kind of interesting and simple action figure. All the clothes are cloth, which I think is very interesting. He's got a bedroll, he's got a walking stick, a belt, and a backpack. Very interesting little take on Frodo. Now, as I said, they have variations. So here's one for Frodo in Lorien. And so this takes place, obviously, much, much later in the story. He's got a Lorien hood with the leaf brooch. I like that. He's got Sting right there. And he's got belt, walking stick, backpack, and a sheath. And so it's slightly different. But it's the same character, same general action figure base, just with different clothing. And then here's another one. This is kind of, I would say, the vanilla one, the basic one. This is just Frodo the Hobbit. And so if you didn't get any of them, this is the most basic one. He's actually got what looks like a White Tree of Gondor bedroll. Interesting. And of course he's got Sting, a backpack, and all of that. So if you only had to get one, I guess this would have been it. Moving on to maybe a different character, one that we don't really see in the films all that much. This is Ugluk, and this is Ugluk in his cave. Now I've got like 4 of Ugluk, the troll, or the orc rather. So here you go. He is an Uruk-hai of Isengard, according to the back of the box. And he's got a bunch of just different things. A little white hand shield, so obviously from Isengard, as well as just a bunch of other small little items. And while you have him with a certain color variant and all that, as you go through each of these, this one is Ugluk on the hunt, where now he's got a bow and everything. As you can see, it's just slight color variations. And a little bit of variation in the things that came with it. Here is Ugluk at war. And again, basically just a different color. And finally, here is Ugluk the orc. Nothing special with it, just kind of the specific kind of vanilla base model. And here he has a war helmet. So I thought it was pretty interesting to kind of see an orc in the vision of pre-Jackson era. Very, very strange indeed. I'll go back to another character we don't see a lot of, necessarily outside of the Lord of the Rings franchise in terms of the films, and that is Galadriel. Now, this is a really strange take on Galadriel. She actually, in my opinion, looks very strange, but here is Galadriel. And this is just called the White Lady. Obviously, she's the elf queen. And as you can see, she has her reflecting pool right here, as well as the picture. So harken back to the Lord of the Rings films, if you've seen those, where Frodo has his vision. And of course, those are going to be the parts that come with this action figure. Although I don't know this one is much of an action figure, seeing as how it's all basically one piece of molded plastic with some moving arms. It's not a lot of action there, but Galadriel, the White Lady. Now, I found these to be very interesting. I have two of them. I'm going to show you, this first one is called the Forest Balrog. It's actually hard to see the features of his face, so I'm going to tilt this forward in a moment. But the Forest one is kind of got a green color, and I don't have the actual kind of standard Balrog, so I only have this Forest variant and then one other variant, neither of them are which are kind of the standard one. I wish you could see his face a bit better. I'm trying to get you a view there, as well as I can give you a view right there on the back of the box. And he's got this kind of crazy rune sword as well as his fire whip. Again, it's hard to think of the Balrog in any other way than how it was portrayed in Lord of the Rings. And here is the Shadow Balrog. Now, I'm going to note this because I know that in the Lord of the Rings community, this is probably one of the most talked about things. He has wings. Now, wings in the Lord of the Rings for the Balrog is a big deal. Some people argue, oh, Balrogs don't have wings, and some people argue, of course they have wings. And unfortunately, the way that Tolkien wrote the description, it could go either way. But I think a lot of artists choose to give Balrogs wings. So those are the Balrogs. Alright, let's pull this over. I'm going to save that one for later. Let's look at Gimli. Here is Gimli in Lorien. So there's Gimli. Of course, he's got his cloak and he's got his clasp right there. And so again, this is the timeline when they would be in Lorien, and of course their dress will change a bit. We also have Gimli when he's just Gimli of the Fellowship. So this is Gimli as his kind of, I think, really base vanilla model. He's got a big axe over there. And it's very interesting, in my opinion, this one. Gimli, again, it's hard to imagine Gimli that isn't John Rhys Davies. But here we have Gimli that looks very much just like a Viking, very Norse. In fact, if you were to take this out of the box, you could be maybe confused for either Odin or Thor, just because of the way he looks. I do have one more Gimli, and this is him. This is just Gimli the dwarf, so maybe this is more the vanilla version. And again, he comes with just some really basic things. Now, I don't have any of the other main characters, except for one that I haven't shown you yet, but I then have to surprise you with my favorite versions of these action figures. And this is probably my favorite. Absolutely. My favorite, because I don't know what else to call him except for Graceland Frodo. This actually technically is Frodo in the Barrow Downs. It's Graceland Frodo. That is Elvis in Hobbit form, if I have ever seen Elvis in Hobbit form. I don't know what to make of that decision. But if you know the story from the book, and of course if you've only seen the films you would know this, but there's a moment where Frodo and the hobbits are in the Barrow Downs and they get caught in a trance and fall asleep, and they dress and they wake up in new clothes, different types of clothes, and so this is it. This is the white clothes. It just looks like Elvis. It looks like Elvis. It's Frodo Elvis. It is amazing. And then, of course, I think the piece de resistance here has got to be the take that they have on Gollum. Now, I'm going to speak a little bit here to Gollum as a character. Gollum in Jackson's films, I think, is probably one of the best done Gollums we've ever had. Very easy to connect with, was able to transform from Smeagol to Gollum, and you could both hate him as well as feel sorry for him, have pity on him. Very much the intent there, and of course Andy Serkis played him really well. And I think back to all the other films where you have the Rankin and Bass Gollum, where he looks like a frog man, and you have the Gollum from the original cartoon by Ralph Bakshi, who's kind of like spiky looking. Looks really weird in my opinion. But ultimately, this has got to be the strangest looking Gollum I have ever seen. And so, I have two, but I'm going to show you this one. My favorite is this one, because they title him Gollum, the Evil Hobbit. Now that is just a bizarre looking character right there. And of course, it's basically him, his boat, and a bunch of fish, because what else is going to come with a Gollum action figure except for a bunch of fish? And maybe the One Ring, but that's not in there. And then I do have one more variation on him, and this is just Gollum the Fisherman, which is really weird because there's nothing different. He's got less fish. So why the Evil Hobbit has like 4 fish to his name, and the one who gets the title, the Fisherman, only has 1. Seems like the Evil Hobbit is a better fisherman. But either way. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say this. I don't know that Gollum can technically be called a Hobbit. Certainly he is of the river folk, and the hobbits were descendant from that. That's another thing where I think people go back and forth a lot on. And when you begin to talk about races in Middle-earth, people go back and forth on it. Anyway, I thought it was very, very interesting. And I think it'd be very entertaining to take a look at some of these action figures, because they can just be so very strange. I mean, they are just odd. But they're also an interesting little insight into a different way of looking at Middle-earth and the characters there within. So there you go. These are the ones I have. And I'll take some shots of the back of the box so you can see what some of the other characters may have looked like. I don't have the action figures for them, but you can certainly go probably on eBay and find some of them. These are very, very interesting. And oddly enough, I'm actually looking to now sell these or get rid of them. I want to give them to someone who can actually appreciate them. These are obviously unboxed. The boxes are not in the best condition. That's actually, they came in this condition when I bought them. They were boxed up this way, so some have creases and folds. But these are actually pretty old. Let's see when these were made. 1998 is the copyright on Graceland Frodo here. So this is a good 3 years before the films came out. So it's very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it with a nice shot of Graceland Frodo for your enjoyment. And see you next time.